There is a road deep in the countryside, isolated and deserted, that no one dares to travel on at night. People say it's cursed. The older folks talk about laments and screams echoing through the air, as if someone is suffering there. The Road of Laments, as it's known, was the site of a terrible accident, and since then, anyone who dares to pass through it at night never returns. The accident happened about 30 years ago, when a young couple, Lucas and Mariana, were traveling to the neighboring town. The night was moonless, and the road, narrow and winding, became even more frightening. Mariana, sitting in the passenger seat, began to complain about the feeling that something was wrong, as if they were being watched. Lucas tried to calm her down, saying it was just the empty road and the wind, but the feeling of unease wouldn't leave her. It was then, on the sharpest curve of the road, that the car skidded. With the impact, the vehicle rolled over several times and fell into a ditch by the roadside. Lucas, who was driving, survived, but Mariana wasn't so lucky. She died right there, her body trapped among the wreckage of the car. Since that day, anyone who passes the road at night says they hear Mariana's screams. But the strangest thing is that these screams aren't like those of someone who's dead. They sound as if she's asking for help, as if Mariana's soul is still trapped there, unable to move on. It's said that the curse began when Lucas, in shock and full of guilt, went to search for Mariana's body at the accident site. He tried to save his beloved, but it was too late. He crawled to where she was, touching her face, but she was already gone. Desperate, Lucas, in an attempt to redeem himself, made a promise. He swore he would return every night to the road until Mariana's soul was freed, until the screams stopped. But as the days went by, the situation only worsened. Lucas became obsessed with the road. He started driving there every night, without sleeping, his eyes fixed on the curve where the accident happened. He said he could feel Mariana's presence calling him, and her screams followed him with every trip. The people in the town tried to help him, but he was no longer the same. He said that if he didn't go there, something horrible would happen, that Mariana's soul would never rest. But the worst happened on the last night Lucas went to the road. The villagers heard the screams louder than ever, but this time, it wasn't just Mariana's. There was another voice, deep and menacing, as if something had joined her. When the neighbors reached the road, they found Lucas's car stopped at the same curve where the accident happened, but there was no sign of Lucas. The only thing left was a bloodstain on the driver's seat and the echoes of the laments, now more distant, but still there. After their desperate escape, João, Carlos, and Ana ran through the forest without stopping, without looking back. The biting wind and the sound of dry leaves under their feet seemed to amplify their sense of panic. They knew that no matter how fast they ran, they were still deep in the forest and far from home. But the fear of returning to the house, now with Isabel watching them, drove them forward without question. They reached a clearing where the moonlight seemed stronger, and began to rest, panting and exhausted. But as they settled down, something strange happened. The sudden calm was broken by a sound, a faint whisper, but clear. They looked at each other, trying to identify where it was coming from, but saw nothing. The whisper continued, and it seemed to be getting closer with each second. Carlos was the first to speak. "Are you guys hearing this?" Ana and João nodded, but neither of them could say a word. The whisper seemed to transform into words, but the sentences were distorted, as if they were being spoken by someone underground, distant, but at the same time very close. Suddenly, the sound stopped. The silence in the forest was absolute, as if the very air had stopped. But soon, the sound of footsteps began to approach. Light footsteps, but firm, as if someone was walking among the trees, right next to them. João, with his heart racing, looked at his friends. "It can't be, we left the house. What else could be following us?" Carlos, without thinking twice, grabbed the flashlight and began to shine it around the area. The shadows of the trees stretched in strange ways, as if they were moving on their own. Suddenly, the flashlight went out by itself, plunging them into total darkness. Ana, who was already visibly nervous, began to cry softly, her eyes fixed on the direction of the trees. She felt a presence, a force that was there, between them, watching. Joao tried to calm her down, telling her it was just fear taking over her mind. But he himself didn't believe what he was saying. It was then, in the pitch-black night, that a figure appeared before them. A girl. No, she wasn't an ordinary girl. Her face was pale, with empty, piercing eyes, and black hair falling over her face. She said nothing, but her fixed gaze seemed to be searching for something, as if waiting for a response. The figure was Isabel, the same one they had seen in the house. Joao, terrified, took a step back. "Isabel?" he asked, his voice trembling. The girl didn't answer. She just pointed to the forest to her left, and with supernatural speed, vanished between the trees, leaving behind a trail of dark smoke that surrounded them. The air became dense and hard to breathe. Carlos, now without courage, started running without thinking. Ana followed, but Joao hesitated. Something in those empty eyes had paralyzed him, as if he knew it wasn't over yet. He looked once more to where the girl had pointed, and then he saw it. Something was moving there in the shadows. A tall, undefined silhouette, getting closer with heavy steps. It was as if the very ground began to tremble, and Joao felt the earth opening beneath his feet. When he tried to run, the air grew dense, and the sound of a low laugh echoed through the forest. Carlos and Ana were ahead, but stopped when they heard something behind them. Joao was in panic, but before he could scream, the trees began closing around him, blocking his path. He was trapped, and the silhouette in front of him was getting closer and closer. He tried to break free, but something was pulling him to the ground, as if the very roots of the forest were grabbing him. "Joao!" Ana screamed, but he couldn't move anymore. And then, everything went black. When they woke up, it was already daytime. They were at the edge of the forest, far from the house and the area where they had found the diary. But something had changed. They couldn't remember exactly how they had gotten out of the forest, but they knew something had helped them, or rather, something had freed them. The three of them were sweaty and exhausted, with lost looks, as if what they had experienced was real, but at the same time unreachable. They never spoke about that night again, and they never returned to that place. However, every time they passed by a forest, the echo of a whisper, soft and distant, still seemed to follow them. In the days that followed, the feeling that something was wrong didn't go away. Joao, Carlos, and Ana tried to get back to their routines, but their nights were filled with nightmares of Isabel's pale face and the whispers they could never identify. Every time they closed their eyes, the sound seemed to get louder, as if Isabel's presence was still chasing them. But the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, Carlos received a mysterious phone call. When he answered, a soft and distorted voice, almost a whisper, said only one word: "Come back." He tried to call back, but the number was unknown, and the call had disappeared without a trace. Desperate, he called Joao and Ana, telling them what had happened. They were starting to convince themselves that what happened that night in the forest wasn't just a panic-induced illusion. Something had been awakened, something that was still lurking, waiting. They decided to return to the forest, hoping to put the nightmare to rest once and for all. It wasn't an easy decision, but they knew that if they didn't, the whispers, visions, and nightmares would never stop. That night, when they got close to the house, the feeling was oppressive. The forest was darker than ever, and the air felt heavier. They walked in silence, the shadows around them seeming to move almost consciously, as if the trees were watching. When they arrived at the house, what they found there was even more disturbing. The door was open, as if someone was waiting for them. But inside, there were no signs of life, only the echo of footsteps from someone who had long since left. And then the whispers began again. Thank you for watching another Dark Tales video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any scary stories. See you next time, and beware of the dark.